I would like to, at this time, turn the meeting over to Eric. He works in our Office of Invasive Species Coordination. He's our planning coordinator. And one of the things that he's spending a considerable amount of time on right now is developing a rapid response plan and a framework for moving forward once we identify something, hopefully early in an infestation, to put into place a rapid response. And so with that,
Leslie kind of gave me a really good introduction there, so I'll
has joined the conference.
My introduction. But for those of you that don't know, this is one of the tasks that I've been given since I first came on here, is to develop this rapid response framework so that we follow the same procedure each time and consider the whole host of opportunities available to us when we have a new invasion. And so this document's been in the works now for
has joined the conference.
And it hasn't really been vetted yet. There's been a few people that have taken a look at some of the early drafts. So I guess my message is this isn't written in stone. So any comments that you have on it would be great. And sometime after this meeting, I do plan to get the hard copies out to people, take a look at and comment some more on. So with that, a little background on the document is the intent with it is to be a document for all resource managers to be able to follow in the event of a new invasion. And it's not necessarily supposed to give you any answers, but make you think about the whole host of things that you should be thinking about and considering in an invasion. And if you have any questions as I'm going along here, feel free to butt in quickly and before you get too far along, so that I can address your concerns at that point. Hope it'll work. And if not,
slideshow. Oh, oopsie. Okay.
Hold on here.
Yeah, I think we need to go to slideshow. There, just make sure it's slideshow. Sorry, just like.
I don't know why it's not. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay. Basically, before we get into rapid response, there's 3 primary management strategies for invasive species. I'll just review those. And the first one is prevention, which is obviously our preferred strategy. But as we all know, prevention doesn't always work. So then the second defense would be early detection and rapid response, which I'll kind of get into the framework that we've developed here. And then the third would be control and management, which are basically actions taken to lessen the impact of an established population. And once you get to that control and management stage, you've pretty much decided that eradication probably isn't going to work. So now you're basically going to manage the existing population. Here's the framework that we've developed here, and you see all the parts of it here. You have early detection reporting, then verification. And those I kind of classify as your early detection portion of the rapid response. And then your rapid response is your notification, your rapid assessment, your planning, your response, your monitoring and evaluation, and your restoration. Here's the process, kind of in a little flow chart. One thing that I want to point out to people in this is that the public outreach begins early on in the process, and it begins actually in the second half of the notification phase, which I'll show you here. Let me back up here. Which I'll show you in the next slide after this next one here, I guess. So just keep in mind that public outreach is an important part, and we need to keep that in mind as we go through the whole process. Verification is, you think it's pretty simple. You want to confirm you have the individual that you think you do before you take any action, but surprisingly,
has joined the conference.
We do have a tendency to jump the gun. Everybody gets excited, and this happened with our EAB way back before we actually did have a confirmation in New York State. We thought we had it, and luckily, it didn't go too far before it was, a negative confirmation. So you want to make sure that you do have the individual you think you do, and that needs to be validated by, physical sample has to be validated by an expert. Simple things like confirming the accuracy of a report, you think that would be easy to do, but we just had a instance here last week where somebody called up and said that they thought that they may have seen a Asian longhorn beetle up at Wakely Dam in the Moose River Plains, but nobody took the person's phone number or name, so, that's all we had to go on. So you really need to collect even the basic information, the person's name, phone number, what they thought they saw, where they thought they saw it, and that sort of thing. So we need to make sure we do that. And then the sample, obviously we'd like to get a sample and get it to the individual who's responsible for the positive identification. Here's the notification process. If you work down through this from the beginning, you see the report is received, and then you gather the evidence and you get it on to the recognized experts for confirmation. And the key with this is that there's really two parts to the notification process. The one is the initial identification, which I used a recognized expert in this exercise, and that could be anybody like Jerry Carlson, who he says, yes, this, I'm 99.9% sure that this is EAB, and then it has to go to APHIS for the official confirmation by the person who's designated by APHIS to be able to say, yep, this is what you have. So it's really a kind of a check and balance there. And the key is the initial confirmation kind of lets everybody, all the relevant resource managers know, hey, we think we have this, but we can't really notify the public until we have that official confirmation from the identified expert. We almost ran into a little bit of problem with EAB here where, we were really sure we had, positive EAB, but we really couldn't say anything because USDA didn't give us the official confirmation, and we really need to be careful that we don't go out to the public before we get that official confirmation, and then we would set out a press release, and then it would become public information. And it's really difficult in this day and age with email and all these listservs and stuff because things start flying around. But luckily, we didn't jump the gun and we just need to be conscious on when we do give that official notification. And if you notice there, this whole time we're kind of proceeding along with our assessment activities, including the delimitation of the infestation. So once we get that, yes, we think we have this, we've already started our delimitation to figure out the extent of what the infestation is. Basically, the rapid assessment is, is the invasion finite, and is it eradicable? And not every invasion, is going to be eradicable. Spiny water flea, for instance, in Sacandaga Lake, we know it's there. We don't think we're going to be able to eradicate it, so we're going to want to contain it and keep it from spreading into other water bodies. So basically, your rapid assessment
David Berg
is looking
has
at
joined the conference.
Everything that's basically delimiting the infestation. You're going to want to define the roles and responsibilities of the individuals involved, because chances are there's going to be a lot of agencies and people involved. And this is where you would, pull together your management team, your lead coordinator, who's going to run the whole incident, and you may even have to implement the incident command system here if it's going to, entail a bunch of different agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, us, Ag and Markets. You're going to need some type of framework that everybody can work towards the same goal under. The other thing that you're going to do at this point is you're going to want to establish your internal and external communications. You know, what kind of information are you going to be giving the public? You want to make sure that that message is the same, that we're not, you know, different agencies aren't handing out different information. So you're going to need like a public participation strategy. And then you're also going to want to do an inventory of the types of resources you're going to need to do your assessment, depending on what the invasion is. You know, whether you're going to need people with pesticide applicator licenses or people with chainsaw training so they can run chainsaws, things like that. So you want to make sure that you have the available resources. And then obviously you're going to want to put in some type of spread prevention at this point so that you don't allow that invasion to spread while you're doing your delimitation survey. And sometimes, you know, I mean, this may be a quarantine. It may be as simple as a barrier on a stream to keep fish from migrating down. So it doesn't have to be something really complicated, but you have to think about it. The next stage from there is the planning stage, and this is basically where you're gonna look at your, you know, all these possible opportunities that you have in your toolbox to deal with this invasion. Some things you're going to want to think about are, you know, obviously I mentioned a little bit the pathways and the source. How did it get there? You know, the species biology, management options, the life stages present, the age of the infestation, neighboring states' actions or inactions on a certain species, with, you know, the anticipated cost of the effort. That's a big one because you know, we only have not a lot of funding available. Available resources. Talked about that a little bit. The time of year. You know, what's the reproductive strategy of the species at hand, and where are we?
Has joined the conference.
Compared to that, special status, like wilderness. If it's in a wilderness area, then that, you know, that brings about a whole other game that we're dealing with here. So there's just a lot to think about, and as I mentioned earlier, this phase, the planning phase, and this framework document I have isn't necessarily going to give you answers to these questions, but there are things that you should at least think about when you're considering addressing this, so that, you know, if somebody asks a question, well, what about this, what about that, you've hopefully thought about it. And then the management options, obviously, there's a whole host of options, from physical activities, biological activities, to regulatory activities. So, you know, again, there's a whole school of those type of things. The permits is an interesting one, because any type of action, obviously, you have to consider permitting requirements, and these can be real hurdles for a rapid response, and that's something we're going to have to address as we continue responding to these, because most of these environmental laws presume that these regulated actions will cause harm, and they don't recognize that some actions, like eradication, are intended to do good by removing these individuals. So it's kind of opposite of what we're trying to do. So that can become a problem. So permitting is usually what takes us the longest amount of time, is to get the necessary permits and go through the process. And sometimes it can be streamlined a little bit, but not every instance. So it's something to be thinking about. And the response, you know, basically, I don't know of a situation where we won't have a response, whether, you know, even if it's not eradication or control. You know, I think we'll do some outreach at the minimum, but hopefully we found it soon enough that we'll, you know, eradication is an option, and then if not, you know, obviously we'll have to drop back to control and manage. But the response is actually where you implement your operational plan. You know, and by this time you should have all your permits approved, and it's just a matter of going through and you know, with your operational plan. Then after the response is complete, it's not over. You have to do some monitoring and evaluation to see if you've met your goals or your objectives. And one thing that came up with some preliminary review of this document is ecological indicators. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, how are we judging whether or not we've met our goals or our objectives? I mean, the easiest way probably is to say, well, you know, we've done a survey and there's no more snakehead in the pond. You know, if our argument is that the snakehead are affecting the native population of fish, then we should see an increase in those fish species that they would be eliminated. So this is kind of an interesting topic, and the example that came up was garlic mustards. You know, you can sit there and pull garlic mustard to your eyes bulge out of your head, and unless you have an ecological indicator, you should be seeing some native species start to recolonize those areas that you're removing the garlic mustard. I mean, it's easy to go back and say, yeah, you know, we have less garlic mustard, but are we really accomplishing our goal? Are we getting more native species recolonization afterwards? And the key point of the whole discussion was that, you know, there may be other factors
has left the conference
at work, especially with the garlic mustard, and you know, where you may not be seeing more species start to recolonize, and the example of white-tailed deer, high deer populations being a possible culprit of why we're not seeing those native species come back, and the garlic mustard is simply just filling those gaps of those species that the deer are eating, and they're just being opportunistic. So, you know, I'd like to talk, you know, a little bit more about these ecological indicators, because it really does, you know, shed a different light on the whole response element of it, and you know, it's easy to look to say, yeah, you know, we don't have as much garlic mustard, or we don't have snakehead anymore, but you know, we're really accomplishing our goal, and you know, I think that's the bottom line, and the real question is, do we still have species diversity that we originally had, or not? And in some instances, we may not. So, you know, the big question comes up: well, you know, should you be expending the resources to do that activity or not? Evaluation and the monitoring evaluation is also important for feedback. You know, how well did the process work? You know, what did your tactics work? You know, what can we do differently next time? And that kind of ties into the long-term preparedness of you know, the effectiveness of the response. And we've done a little bit of this, and it's been beneficial so far with the snakehead. You know, after the snakehead response, we had a little get together, and we talked about what worked and what didn't work, and what we could do next time. And ironically, some of the things we discussed about after the first response, our thoughts were correct, because we did find a little bit of we found a couple more snakehead this spring. So way back initially, we thought that this one wetland area we didn't get good treatment in, so we kind of questioned whether or not, you know, it was effective in that area. And this spring, a couple of snakehead were found, so that kind of verified that we didn't. So those types of things, it's good to get together and talk about them afterwards, so that you know, you can focus on them and make adjustments the next time. And unfortunately, this is probably one of the most important aspects of the whole response, but it's one of the things that gets kind of, after the response, you know, we're all done, we've worked hard, and the money's gone, so this is one thing that kind of falls off the table. So you really need to put an honest effort in monitoring and evaluation. you spend all the time and money and resources on a response. So keep that in mind. And then at the end is the restoration, which, again, this is one of those things that, you know, if you don't do your monitoring and your evaluation, restoration, you're not even thinking about this. So this is important for a number of reasons. One, we found that when we did the snakehead exercise down in Orange County, that people would. Well, somebody asked at the public meeting, you know, what are you going to, you know, once you're all done, are you going to restock the ponds? And and everybody just kind of looked at each other, and you know, we didn't even really think about it. But at that point, we said, yeah, you know, we really need to consider restoring the ponds and putting some fish back in, because I mean, we would have just walked away and been like, yep, the snakehead are gone, and the people wouldn't have had any fish in the pond. So you need to think about that, and when you do, you want to use the best management practices out there, because the last thing you want to do is when you go in with restoration efforts is to reinfect the site with contaminated material or dirty equipment, which is really easy to do if you're not conscious of it. And obviously you're going to want to use native species where possible, and again, you're going to want to even monitor those restoration sites to make sure that those native species do establish themselves, and that you're not getting any invasives recolonizing those areas. So another, you know, really important part of the response process that often gets overlooked. Okay, so that's basically the process, and you know, the big question is, you know, why the big hurry? And as we all know, that, you know, time is critical to any successful eradication. If you know, if we identify it early, we have to respond quickly. Otherwise, there's no sense in you know, detecting it early. The next slide here is probably a pretty popular slide to a lot of you, and this kind of shows you that here. And I guess the take-home message with this is the cost rise and the chances for success diminish geometrically over time. So as you move along that line there, you know, your chances of eradication decrease, and it's going to cost you a lot more money. Okay, so what do we need if we're going to be successful with early detection and rapid response? First, we need effective coordination. So we need all involved players talking to each other, and you know, I think we've got a good start on that. You know, we've got the prisms engaged, and people awareness is starting to become more evident out there. We're starting to see some more phone calls from people, and I think that's due in part to, you know, a couple of these last major invasions here. Now I think people are finally starting to see the writing on the wall, and you know, some of the politicians have, you know, Hillary mentioned Schumer is getting involved in the invasive species scene. So we need everybody on the same page. We also need useful guidance. As a lot of you know, we're providing some of that here. You know, we have this framework document I'm working on. Dave's working on the 4-tier list. I'm also working on a generic environmental impact statement for rapid response activities. We're going to have a comprehensive management plan in the works here. So we're working on that guidance. The other thing we need is a supportive regulatory environment, and this goes back to you know, the permitting process and some of our rules and regs where they're hurdles for us. So you know, those types of things can really put a hamper on a rapid response. So we need to work on that as well. We need established and trained teams. You know, we're working on this as well. You know, the agencies, prisms, and contractors. We hope to be able to get some response teams funded, but again, that's a funding issue, and as soon as we get available funding, I think we'll be able to, you know, to work on that. And then there's also other resources. There's people. There's you know.
Has joined the conference.
You know, this runs the whole array of depending on the type of invasion and the type of response, so there's a whole bunch of things there. And with that, that concludes my little presentation here.